home-smoked salmon. It's salmon that you cure and smoke yourself inside. Kansas City-style spare ribs with a spicy apple barbecue sauce. Heart-healthy turkey pastrami, hot off the smoker. And a smoke-roasted raspberry pear crisp. There's nothing like the fragrant scent of wood smoke to bring out the sweetness in fruit. Smoking, a primal technique for the ultimate flavor. I'm Raichlen, and from the beautiful Tubac Golf Resort in southern Arizona, it's time to fire up the smokers. Smoke is the soul of true barbecue. As you ascend the ladder of barbecue enlightenment, you want to be able to smoke a variety of foods on a variety of different smokers. Today, I'm going to show you all the tools, fuels, and techniques you need for killer smoking. Sorry, folks, no gas grills allowed. And for many people, the quintessential barbecue is Kansas City-style ribs. Few dishes are more satisfying to cook than a rib, because when you've nailed it, you know it. The combination of spice and smoke flavor will be present in exactly the right ratio. The rib will be tender but not soft. It'll be loaded with flavor. It'll be a beautiful thing to behold. It'll be fun to rip apart with your fingers and eat. Ribs are just the perfect food. The rib of choice in Kansas City is the spare rib. It's a little tougher than the baby back, but the flavor is richly rewarding. The first step is to cut off this tough flap of meat called the brisket. Next, you want to remove the membrane on the back of the ribs, and to do so, insert a sharp implement like the end of a meat thermometer and pry it off the bones. The reason that you remove this is that it's tougher than the rest of the meat, and it impedes the absorption of the spice and smoke flavors. So once you loosen it, grab it with a paper towel and simply yank it off the ribs. Sometimes it's a little hard to get off. Just take your time, because the results are really worth it. And that's the hardest thing you'll have to do. Once skinning the ribs is done, make the rub. This is a simple rub starting with coarse salt, freshly ground black pepper, sweet paprika, granulated sugar, garlic powder, and cayenne pepper for a little bite. Mix the ingredients with your fingers, breaking up any lumps in the paprika, and season both sides of the rib with rub. Now, you can cook the ribs right away, but you'll get a much richer, deeper flavor if you let the ribs marinate with the rub for at least 4 hours or as long as overnight. Now let me tell you about the smoker. This is called an offset barrel smoker. It's made out of oil pipe, and it has a fire chamber here where you actually generate the heat and smoke, which is lower or offset from the smoke chamber, which is right here, where you do the actual cooking. Let's get the ribs. So this is a cool tool. This is called a meat hook, and it's handy for transferring the meat to and from the smoker. Okay, close the door to the smoke chamber. Now the way you generate smoke is by tossing wood chunks, or I actually have a couple of soaked hickory logs, and toss them on the fire. And to control the heat, there's a damper on the back here, open wide, more air, slightly higher temperature. You can also control the heat by opening and closing this damper on the chimney. One nice feature about this smoker is it has dual thermometers. Remember, the meat cooking in the front of the smoke chamber next to the firebox is going to be a little hotter than the meat on this side. So you might want to switch them around. Just make sure you maintain an even temperature. Okay, cooking time about 4 to 5 hours, target temperature 250 degrees. Here's what the ribs look like after 3 hours. Now you can see one rack I have just wrapped in foil, and if you're working on a charcoal kettle grill, the foil strategy is a good one. Helps keep the ribs moist and tender. Here's another way to moisten the ribs. Just take a bottle of beer and shake it up. Mop sauce in the bottle. So the ribs need another hour to an hour and a half. The first act of cooking was grilling. And if you look at human evolution, there was a marked change at that point in history about 500,000 years ago when our ancestors started to cook. Before grilling, the skull looked more like an ape's skull, giant jaw, tiny cranium. After the first evidence of the use of the fire, you see the modern face with the ability to speak. So you could really say that barbecue begat civilization. And here are the ribs at 4 hours, and they are just about cooked. How can you tell? Take a look. The meat has shrunk back from the ends of the bones about 1/4 of an inch. They're also tender enough to pull apart with your fingers. But there's one last step. I like to apply a layer of barbecue sauce the last 15 minutes to cook the sauce into the ribs. This is a spicy apple barbecue sauce, and you just brush it onto the ribs. If you're cooking low and slow on an offset barrel smoker like this one, you don't need to wrap your ribs. However, if you're working on a charcoal kettle grill, you may find that wrapping the ribs halfway through makes them more moist and tender. Another 15 minutes and our ribs should be perfect. The ribs are ready. Let's see how we did. Now, the sign of a perfect rib is it should be tender enough to pull apart with your fingers. See, you don't need to boil ribs. And I just want to cut one off here to show you something. Do you see this reddish layer right under the surface? This is called the smoke ring, and this lets you know you've nailed it. Kansas City spare ribs. It's barbecue nirvana. The first thing you have to know about smoking is it's one of the most ancient cooking methods there is, and it was one of the first major technological advances forward as we evolved as a species. Why did people smoke food originally? Because it kept the flies away and it preserved foods. In an age before refrigeration, it was a perfect way to preserve food for use in the future. Now, people also discovered, gee, not only does it preserve food, it makes it taste delicious. Here's something for all you city dwellers who may live in apartments without access to grills or smokers. It's salmon that you cure and smoke yourself indoors. All you need is one of these and some of this, the know-how to put it together. For fish, I like wild salmon, and most of it comes boneless these days, but you can run your fingers over the top feeling for bones, and if you feel the ends of any bones, just pull them out with needle nose pliers. The next step is to make the cure, and the cure is nothing more than a barbecue rub with 2 parts sweetener, like brown sugar, 1 part coarse sea salt, and cracked or freshly ground black pepper to taste. Mix the ingredients with your fingers, breaking up any lumps you may find in the brown sugar. Then you want to put about 1/3 of the cure on the bottom of a baking dish. Place the salmon on top and pour the remaining cure over the fish, making sure to cover the sides. Cure the fish in the refrigerator for 4 hours. Well, salmon is ideally suited to smoking. Why? First of all, it's a full-flavored fish, so it can stand up to the intense taste of the smoke. Second of all, it's a fatty fish. You need a fatty fish because smoking tends to dry fish out, and the fat keeps salmon moist. This is what it looks like after 4 hours. Now, two things have happened during the curing process. Obviously, the salt, sugar, and pepper have flavored the salmon, but the salt has also drawn out some of the liquid, which gives you a firmer consistency. Next, simply take the salmon and rinse it off in cold water. Then blot it dry on paper towels. And the salmon is ready for smoking. You can see the cure has actually firmed up the salmon. Let me show you the smoker. This is a stovetop smoker, and what you do is place about 1.5 tablespoons of hardwood sawdust in the bottom. I'm using cherry. I find that the flavor of cherry goes really great with salmon. Next, place the drip pan on top of the sawdust, and you can line it with aluminum foil. It makes it a little easier to clean up. Next goes the grate, and on top of that, place your salmon and just put on the lid. And you can see the smoker is smoking already. Obviously, I'm working outdoors on a countertop burner. You'll be working indoors on your stove. Be sure to run the exhaust fan on high. Cooking takes about 20 minutes. This is a hot smoke process you want to cook the salmon through. Let's check on the fish. It looks terrific. And the way you test for doneness, you press the fish and you can see it sort of breaks into clean flakes. So just transfer the smoked salmon to a plate, let it cool to room temperature. Here's one we did earlier, and let me show you how to put this together. A little sour cream, a piece of salmon, some capers, and chopped onion. This is fantastic. So whether you cook indoors or in the big, great outdoors, there's no excuse not to smoke your own salmon. It's sometimes said that there's no such thing as truly original ideas, that everyone borrows from everyone else. And that is certainly the case with the American deli classic pastrami. Now, the word pastrami actually comes from a Turkish and Armenian word, basturma, which was a kind of spice-cured meat, sometimes made with beef, sometimes made with horse or camel, that was dried in the air. And if you visit markets in Turkey, you'll actually see long strips of basturma hanging from the rafters of meat markets. Today I'm going to show you how to smoke a heart-healthy version made with turkey breast, because when you use enough spice and smoke, you don't need a lot of fat for flavor. It starts with turkey breast, and this is a 5-pound slab of pure protein. Now, the pastrami cure is what we Americans would call a rub. It starts with ground coriander, freshly ground black pepper, anise, sweet paprika, brown sugar, dry mustard, mace, coarse salt, chopped fresh garlic, and I'll mix these ingredients together. Adding a little oil to make it moist. So spread half the pastrami cure on the bottom of the turkey breast. Cure the pastrami in the refrigerator for 24 hours. This is a really popular smoker. It's a water smoker, affectionately known as the Bullet. I'd like to show you how to put it together. So at the bottom is your firebox with the vent holes that enable you to control the heat. There's a charcoal ring and a charcoal grate at the bottom. I have a chimney starter full of lit charcoal. And the next section is the smoke chamber. And it looks like a big metal cylinder. It fits on top. Next, insert the water pan. And this shields the food from a direct exposure to the fire. And you fill the water pan either with water, or you could use beer or apple cider. One nice feature about this smoker is that it actually has two food grates. So you could put a turkey on the bottom grate and a couple of racks of ribs on top. Finally, you cover the smoker with the domed lid and you place this little trap door in the front. The way you make it smoke is by placing a couple of hardwood chunks through the trap door on the coals. Then replace the trap door and you're ready for business. This is what the turkey pastrami looks like after 24 hours. Put it on the top rack of the smoker. Replace the lid, open the vent, and add a chunk of your favorite hardwood. That's all there is to it. It's been 2 hours. Let's check on the turkey pastrami. Well, it sure looks good, but the way to test it properly is to use an instant read meat thermometer and insert it in the end. We're looking for 170 degrees. Bingo. And normally you would let the turkey pastrami cool for serving, but you know what? This looks so amazing. I'm going to cut into it right now. It has stayed so juicy, it actually squirts when you cut into it. That's one of the nice things about using a water smoker. It helps keep the meat moist. Turkey-inspired pastrami. Let's take a taste. Turkey on rye with a little homemade Russian dressing, sauerkraut, turkey. From the Near East to the Southwest, it's heart-healthy turkey pastrami, hot off the smoker. Yum. We smoke just about everything, even dessert. And there really is kind of a logic to this. And that is that smoke has a way of intensifying the sweetness of plant sugars. It kind of makes you sit up and say, wow, I've never tasted a dessert like this before. Case in point, this raspberry pear crisp. First, the filling. Start with fresh raspberries and Bartlett or Asian pear. Mix in sugar, break it up, flour, and grated fresh lemon zest, and toss the mixture. I'm using raspberry and pear here, but you could use any kind of fruit filling. Apple, blueberry would be great. Next, the topping. Start with ginger snap cookies or your favorite cookie, flour, brown sugar, and a pinch of salt. Process these ingredients to mix. Then add ice cold butter. Just pulse until the mixture is crumbly. You don't want to over-process or you'll wind up with a paste. To put the crisp together, simply spoon the filling into a cast iron skillet. Okay? Then sprinkle the topping over the fruit. It's a bit warm out here in Tubac, Arizona, so my topping got a little softer than I want, but when you make this at home, your topping will be crumbly. Great, now let me show you how to turn a charcoal grill into a smoker. I've shown you how to smoke in a smoker. You can also smoke in a charcoal grill. And it all starts with a chimney starter. This one is filled with lump charcoal. You can use either a piece of crumpled newspaper or one of these paraffin fire starters to light the fire. Again, the advantage of a chimney starter, it funnels the heat upwards so you get uniform ignition. I've got a chimney here that's already lit. And we'll set the grill up for as though we were going to do indirect grilling. So we'll add lit coals on one side and the other. And you may have always wondered what this metal thing is for. It's to help you guide where you pour the lit charcoal. Okay. Last step is to place the drip pan in the center. And you don't really need it for this preparation because the fruit's in a pan, but it will force you to set up the grill for proper indirect grilling. Next, place the fruit crisp in the center and a handful of soaked pear wood chips on each mound of coals. Finally, place the lid on the grill. Open the vent holes. We want to cook the crisp at about 350 degrees for about 45 minutes to 1 hour. One hour later, and it's time for dessert. Check this out. The crisp smells outrageous. So if it flies, swims, oinks, or grows on a tree, you know how to smoke it. See you next time. I thought that by traveling around the world studying barbecuing and grilling, I could learn a tremendous amount about human culture. In Kansas City, there's often a rub, but the rub is applied before the meat is smoked. Smoked salmon is one of those great ideas. It seems to have sprung up everywhere at once. Cooking food low and slow in the presence of a lot of wood smoke is really unique to North America.